views expressed by our guests are their own and do not reflect the official stance of their employer or any affiliated organizations. Welcome back to the Council House Podcast. I'm your co-host, Daniel Abramoff, and today we have another interview with Steve Helvin, Deputy General Counsel of Ethics and Investigations at Verizon. Today we sat down with Steve to talk about his new chair position with CABEN, the Capital Area Business Ethics Network, and CABEN's mission towards bringing compliance professionals together and forming a path for the future. I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks, Daniel. Really happy to be here.
So just off the bat, how would you describe CABEN to somebody who's never heard of it before?
The network was designed quite a long time ago as a response to the business ethics community wanting to come together, looking at the defense industry initiative and some other organizations. Ethics didn't really, as it was building up as a discipline, didn't have that same type of network. So it really started out with a core ethics function, but it's expanded a bit because ethics now touches risk and compliance. And so what we're trying to do is bring a cross-section of industry experts, small businesses, large businesses, folks associated with the government together to really challenge ourselves to advance what we are doing in the field.
And so initially, you'd let me know that CABEN's been around for a very long time. What was the year it was founded?
It was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So with the way I think of it, I learned of it because one of my first bosses, the chief ethics officer of MCI Worldcom, Nancy Higgins, was heavily involved in its formation. And that was right after Enron and obviously Worldcom. And so I was one of the lawyers that was brought in to clean that up. And so, Nancy formed it, and one of my mentors, Carol Marshall, told me about it, and I started to learn a bit more about it, and I always wanted to get more heavily involved. And so I've sort of stayed with the group through the years.
That sounds really interesting. It sounds like there's just really many opportunities to be exposed to what's going on across the board in all these different industries by having just complete insight from all the members. What's a moment where curiosity led you to a new perspective of ethics and compliance?
One of the things I really like about CABEN is that there's a lot of networking organizations that are there just to network. And CABEN certainly has that function, but one of the things that we really tried to do is have the what I would call the real conversations, about what we are doing that's going to drive progress forward, to drive change forward for whatever our organizations are. And so with that, there's been a lot of discussion, of course, about data and how we are using data. And so what we're trying to do, and we have these conversations almost every meeting, is how are we using the vast wealth of information as ethics and risk and compliance professionals that we have to focus outwards and produce insights that can help our business clients. So not just help us assess our own performance, but how are we enabling decision-making on the part of the business? And so, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. So that I think curiosity is fairly critical to understand not just, hey, what are the things that folks are doing that you should be doing because it is industry standard, but what are the new things, right? What are the novel ways in which people are looking at producing those actionable insights? One of the ones that I was particularly excited about, we started categorizing in the past year or so, all we got about 8,000 contacts to our ethics hotline at Verizon. And while I'm speaking on behalf of CABEN, I of course work at Verizon, we started categorizing those by, severity, impact, risk. Different companies have different lingos for it. And we were mostly looking at that as an internal metric of, okay, how are we spending our time? Right, that's valuable. And I talked to others, and they similarly were saying, yeah, we want to be spending our time on the most impactful things that we get. But then I started talking to some of my peers and asking them how they were finding new ways of using that information. And what that led to was a really interesting discovery about substantiation rates and anonymity rates for the most impactful things we got. So the anonymity rate for things that are really, really impactful, allegations against a C-suite or senior vice president level leader, allegations if it was an accounting or bribery thing. Bear in mind, not everything's substantiated, but you get all sorts of allegations that are significant and very hard to raise. So I wasn't surprised to see that the anonymity rate of those contacts outstrips the lower ones because people are more fearful identifying themselves and coming forward, bringing forward bad news.
Sure.
What I was surprised by, though, was that the substantiation rate of those was markedly higher than the lower ones. So what that told me was that, okay, if you get people who are willing to bring forward bad news, you're more likely to get at a really meaningful root cause that you otherwise wouldn't have. And so that allowed me to focus outward in a way that before CABEN I hadn't really thought about, sort of marrying all this together. But it allowed me to focus outward and start talking to our senior most leaders about the importance of how when we talk about speak up culture, it's not just a nice to have, but it can help them drive business outcomes by identifying problems.
Absolutely. And I mean, clearly you're avoiding so many issues by going right to the root cause and nipping
Yes.
it in the bud before anything blows up. And that's very fascinating. Where did you pick up different types of techniques through these types of cabin meetings, or would you say, obviously it sounds like a blend?
It's a blend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the beauty of it. You get nuggets of ideas as you talk to your peers in the industry. You take those back. Some work for you, some don't. You take the best of what you can, and then of course you do your own research, and it produces a very nice feedback loop with the members where you can say, "Hey, I tried this, didn't work for me. Here's why it didn't work for me. But then I did this other thing and I pivoted and I found something really useful out of it."
That to me just very quickly shows one of many values that come from a group like this, and the need to have a group like this to be able to sort of pave the way of experiences and knowledge to combine and avoid mistakes in the future.
Yeah, that's one thing I find that with some networking groups I've been a part of in the past, people have not always wanted to talk about the mistakes and failures, right? And that's something I think that is a differentiating factor for Cabin. It's not necessarily we're airing them out in the big, sort of 30, 40 person meeting, but those moments in between, before, after, where you can sort of talk one-on-one about something that you might have heard in the bigger meeting that piques your interest, and then you can drive something meaningful from there.
You recently had the former general counsel at the SEC join your first meeting, actually, for
Yeah.
Cabin. That's a pretty big deal. How did that come together?
So Megan Barbaro, the former SEC GC, has worked with my wife for a while, starting at the U.S. House of Representatives. I've known about her for a while. She's done some terrific work at the Justice Department, at the House, and of course at the SEC. She's someone I've really admired for quite a while because I think of myself as someone who's here for transformation and sort of progress, and she's very much like-minded. She's also absolutely brilliant attorney, someone who I'd want in my corner if the need ever arose. So, as I thought through, okay, we're having our first cabin meeting, who is someone who can talk to something that's current and relevant and who I know will be very real and candid with our audience. And she was a perfect fit.
That's amazing. And from what I understand, you had somewhat of a back and forth.
Good.
How did that go? And did it shift your thoughts on the SEC in any way?
The great thing about back and forth is they always shift my thoughts. So yeah, so I warned Megan that before the meeting, I was going to challenge her a bit about the SEC's whistleblowing program because I have some very strong feelings on that. Again, not on behalf of Verizon, but yeah, the SEC's whistleblowing program. I get the good it does, but for companies that are trying very, very hard to do the right thing and put in structures, take reporting seriously, take no retaliation seriously, provide examples to employees of just how seriously they take it and what happens to people who retaliate, to folks who are trying to put in the controls to do the right thing. My point to Megan is I don't feel that those companies get enough credit for all the work and investment they're doing on the front end, because what I see are employees who will hold on to things, wait, not report problems because they're hoping, often incorrectly, that they will be able to report something externally. And my point is, I'd rather learn, this is exactly what you had mentioned, I'd rather learn about the root cause issue early and address it, because at a company like mine, we do take things very seriously. We do
Absolutely.
want to do the right thing. So I challenged Megan. I said, this is my perspective coming in. I want you to tell me why I'm wrong. Like, your goal is to explain why I am completely have it, what I'm missing, what I'm not seeing, why the SEC's program is superlative, even taking that into consideration. And she made some really good points. And so it did change my perspective, because she was pointing me to, and is very helpful, she pointed me to data. She pointed me to the specific SEC website, where I could see the exact types of issues that are being raised, and examples of some of the unfortunate outcomes that have happened when companies don't take things seriously. So she basically said, look, understand where you're coming from, but at a particular standard level. Not everyone keeps that standard level, and we serve everyone.
Yeah.
If the public's being harmed, they're being harmed. And I get that. I just like a little more credit for trying.
However, and for organizations like yourself who really do everything they can to get ahead of that, I think maybe that sometimes that gets a little bit lost in the process of seeking out the bad actors, and everyone sort of falls into a bucket.
I think that's right. But on the net, as someone who doesn't want retaliation to occur anywhere, I get on the net it's doing good. It's just a broader aperture than I'd like.
Going back to CABEN, and the benefits that these members get from attending these meetings, how have you seen the different connections that were made pay off?
There's the fairly self-evident benefits that occur with any networking organization of like-minded professionals, right? You do get, and especially in this current time, there are a lot of benefits from networking and information sharing to understand what baselines are, right? I want to understand, how are other companies tackling thorny issues that are emerging risks, because the world is changing quite quickly, and we need to be agile and adapt to it. And as we do that, I don't necessarily want to be, that game whack-a-mole. I don't want to be the mole that's sticking its head way up here, sort of doing something that is an outlier where we're asking to be whacked. So I'd like to understand what the range of reasonable is. And CABEN is great for that, but a lot of networking organizations are great for that. I think some of the things that CABEN is doing that are going to be differentiating, so I have two fantastic members who I'm on the team with, on the board, Nancy Phillips and Gitanjali Sakuja, and they are going to be creating a couple things. One is a mentorship program where we're going to be using data. Nancy's a KPMG person, so she's very data focused.
Sure.
She's going to be surveying our mentors to understand, okay, so our members to understand, what do you want out of a mentorship relationship? If you are a mentee, are you new to a field like trade compliance and looking for someone who's experienced? Are you just starting in this field and could you use someone who's been there, done that for a while? Are you at a small company and want the perspective of another small company person, or are you a big company and want to learn how a more agile entrepreneurial company does things? So we're going to get a lot of data, and then we're going to get a lot of similar data on the mentor side. And so I think we're going to be able to match people up in the local DMV area in a way that I haven't really seen a lot of ethics and compliance networks try to make those meaningful, real connections. And that's something I think is going to be very cool.
Absolutely, that's huge. And in a time where it's so tough to get people together, it's so tough to make new introductions, to have a league of compliance professionals who are excited to meet up and talk about new challenges for tomorrow, I think that's wonderful and certainly much needed.
Yeah, I'll just be really candid about it. Like, I don't need to sit through a meeting and hear about the same AI discussion that I've heard 20 times.
Right.
I think one of the things we are very focused on as a board is making our CABEN members understand that we are here for the more in-depth, granular discussions that are going to lead to action. That's where
Exactly.
we're focused.
In the next few years, where do you want to take CABEN? Where do you see CABEN going?
The way I think about this is, most of the folks we are working with in CABEN have significant day jobs that take a lot of time. They also have outside interests and commitments, and so their time, all of our time, is it's limited, and we should be really purposeful about how we spend and invest that time. So over the next few years, what I'm looking to do is deliver on some of the promises I've been talking to you about, right? I want to increase connectivity. I want to see through data how we are driving changes within organizations as a result of people's participation. I want some of those stories that we can share to show people what the value is they are getting out of engaging with this organization. So to do that, we really need growth, of course, and we need engagement. So we're starting to measure that. We're starting to do a few things to sort of explain the energy that is currently coming from CABEN that we're trying to bring to folks in the DMV area. And the reason for that is the greater the number of engaged people, the more likely we are to make those meaningful connections, right? So you get more people involved, there's a greater likelihood that you will find someone who has something that is purposeful for you. So that's where we're headed.
That's excellent. And obviously, being in the DC area, that tends to really bring a lot of folks in this community. And why do you think that is?
Being in the DC area has an incredible advantage, I think, because if you're in Chicago, if you're in LA, any large metropolitan area, you're going to be able to get that good confluence and mix of different entities being involved. DC, the clear difference is the government and political aspect, right? We get more people who are tied to the government, affiliated with the government, affected by the government in a really, really direct way, right? And so you also have a lot more insight into and connections into what is happening in the current administration. And I think that bringing that into the mix means that you can have some really rich conversations and insights that you might not always get if you were in Miami, candidly. And maybe I'm biased. Maybe the Miami folks will tell me, no, I have it completely backwards. But I do think that that extra connectivity to the political sphere is an advantage.
While you have some really impressive guests coming to speak to the group, who who in the future who would be someone that you'd want to see speak to CABEN?
Candidly, if I can make it that long, I'd love to see one of my daughters speak. Because I'm hoping that they would grow up and do something that is sort of worthy. And they don't need to be an ethics or a compliance person, but I'm hopeful that they'll grow up and maybe be sort of someone who does something that's worth bringing in to talk to a bunch of ethics geeks like me.
Well, honestly, I'm sure at this point they've already probably learned enough to be able to be dangerous in that world. So I love that answer, especially being a father of a 9-year-old girl myself. That 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 warms my heart. Thank you so much for sitting down with us to talk about CABEN, and we really look forward to following up with you and seeing how things are going with your programs. It is an excellent program, and we're looking forward to seeing it grow.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Really appreciate you all having me on.